While the South Korean government had been busy trying to more immediately lower oil prices, Europe has introduced a market intervention plan. The objective is similar. Authorities are designing measures aimed at reining in an unprecedented energy crisis as fueled inflation. But the European Commission's approach aims to curb demand. We examine the ongoing energy crisis in Europe with an expert in the field. This morning, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Schiffling, a senior lecturer in supply chain management at the Liverpool John Moores University in the UK. It is in the wee hours of the night over there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's late over there.
It is quite late today, yeah, or early, depending on how you want to look at it.
Thank you for joining us despite the wee hours. Let's get to the heart of the discussion. I do think it's vital we talk about the energy crisis in Europe. It does affect other countries too. Do you believe that the latest energy crisis being faced by the EU reflects a failure by the bloc to diversify its supply of oil and gas away from Russian imports?
Well, the EU is not a unified bloc in terms of what the energy mix is in every country. So different countries have very, very different energy mixes there. Some countries much more dependent on Russian imports than others. So we are seeing that, for example, in Germany, that has a very high dependence on imports from Russia and is at the same time trying to get away from coal power, very polluting energy, as well as nuclear energy. So they really created a dependency there. Other countries are not dependent to such a high degree, but overall, Europe is importing a lot of its energy, or used to be importing a lot of its energy from Russia. And that's why we're now seeing the issues of trying to diversify, trying to find different countries to import from, or different energy sources altogether, getting away from oil and gas.
During the height of the pandemic, we witnessed disruptions to the global supply chains like we had never seen before. Looking at the larger context, do you believe global supply chains were flawed to begin with and its inherent risks and vulnerabilities were simply exposed by the war in Ukraine and the pandemic?
Global supply chains were not necessarily designed to withstand massive disruptions. Global supply chains for the last couple of decades have been designed to focus on speed, getting things to us quicker so all of our online orders can be there the next day or the same day, getting to us very cheaply. So products from all over the world can reach us fast, can reach us without much cost to us. Global supply chains were not necessarily designed with disruption in mind and resilience in mind. And that's really been shown up that we have not invested that much in resilience and building up, for example, suppliers in different areas of the world. So we saw that very drastically during COVID, when we had border closures, when we had different areas in the world affected at different times. So if all of your suppliers are in one area, that's going to really hurt a supply chain. So supply chains were doing what they're designed to do. And we're now seeing, well, it's got to be trade-offs. You can't have everything. You can't have a supply chain that is proof against every shock, but at the same time delivers everything super cheap and also immediately. So there has to be some sort of balance in what we want to see. Of course, you can also see with something like COVID, can you actually insure against that? Can you actually build supply chains that are resilient to the entire world suffering massive disruption all at the same time? That would be very, very difficult. But we are seeing increasing demand for more resilience in supply chains. That's something that's being discussed in many companies at the moment. How can we ensure that we're not quite as vulnerable? We cannot reduce every risk. We can't just live in a perfect world, but we can certainly do something to help ourselves for future disruptions to be a bit more prepared for those.
Be better prepared. Let this be a lesson. God forbid that something similar happens again. But you're right. Something's got to give a little bit affordability, accessibility. I guess we paid the price, so to speak, because we were getting things at a fraction of the price because there were so many companies outsourcing, for example. But now, with the labor market shortage and factories being shut, it was difficult to get my timely shipments from halfway around the world. I do wonder, for the benefit of our viewers who may be unaware, could you tell us a little bit about the EU so-called Emergency Market Intervention Plan? What does it exactly entail? What was it designed to do? And whether you believe it will be actually effective in curbing the runaway energy prices of Europe?
So what this is, it's the State of the Union address by the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and she was laying out plans, proposals for various different interventions to try and tackle this massive crisis over the winter. One big one there is targeting the demand side of this. So we have less supply. So if we can lower the demand to kind of be at the same level, that would, of course, be ideal. It's not quite going to happen, but if we can reduce demand at all, that's going to make the energy we do have last much longer. So in various countries, there's already campaigns saying if everybody can just reduce the temperature in their homes by 1 degree, just turn this thermostat a little down, that would really help across all households. That would be massive savings. There's also countries like Finland, for example, now discussing, do we need to have all of our street lights on all the time, or can we maybe reduce the light a bit? So all these sort of things are being discussed to try and reduce energy consumption. That's one part of the plan, to say we need every member state to cut their consumption, to lower demand as much as you possibly can to get us through this winter. The other part is looking at the energy providers, so energy companies. A lot of them are making a lot of profit right now because the prices are so high. And of course, not all of them actually have the higher cost as well. So if you're producing electricity through wind energy, for example, the wind has not become more expensive, but the prices are the same. So that's the other part of this proposal now, to try and target these excess profits that companies are making and say, well, can we have some of that money to actually help households, to have help small businesses with these massive energy bills? Those are kind of the two main elements of what has been proposed by the European Commission.
I mean, I can only imagine, wouldn't there be pushback from then, let's say, the electricity companies or the oil providers? Wouldn't, because they're naturally businesses, for-profit companies, wouldn't they not be on the same page? Right.
And that is something that a lot of people are saying as well. What we should not do right now is to disrupt the energy market and disincentivize investment in that, or try and punish companies. But there's, of course, the argument that, is it really companies that have done particularly well, have done something really amazing that they should be rewarded for? Or are they benefiting out of people freezing in their houses? Companies having to close down because they cannot run the ovens for the bakery anymore because the prices are too high. So it is a balancing game to try and not disrupt the energy market even further, but at the same time help all those consumers that are going to be really struggling over the winter.
I read a headline on The Guardian, particularly saying that the winters will be cold and there might be retirees, for example, having to choose between putting food on the table or having heat this winter season. That sounds devastating. Do you think the EU needs to take even more drastic measures and to reduce demand through forced energy conservation and maybe even in the future rationing?
That will really depend on how intense our winter is going to be. If we have a fairly mild winter, it should probably be okay. But if we get a very cold winter, obviously people will have much more heating needs, and that will drive the energy demand up much further. So it will be a question of in how far do we reduce voluntarily? Is that really effective? Are people actually taking that seriously and going, okay, I heat a little bit less. Maybe I reduce my time that I spend in the shower. Maybe 15 minutes is not really necessary every day. So if that actually works, if we can reduce the energy demand by a lot, if we have a mild winter, so naturally there's just not as much heating, it could be fine. It's very difficult to forecast. There's also the issue of how much supply are we going to have in the system. If, as some proposals are saying, we'll get more coal power plants back, or Germany has 3 nuclear power plants that are supposed to go off the grid at the end of this year. If they decide to continue on with those plants, there would be more supply. So that could, again, very much shift these puzzle pieces. So we will have to see how this develops. It's very difficult to forecast at the moment because there's just so many moving pieces.
I've also seen reports saying that creating more hydrogen banks might be part of this bigger picture of the emergency market intervention plan. Could the latest energy crisis further incentivize the EU to accelerate its transition away from fossil fuels towards renewable sources?
Oh, absolutely. And there is already a lot of legislation being passed for that. If you're building a new house in Germany right now, you will have to have solar panels on the roof for that. So there is a lot of that drive existing already. But of course, it can be done more. Right now, what we're seeing is actually a bit of a turn back towards coal, which at the end of last year, everybody was going on about COP and, oh no, we want to reduce coal power. Coal is very bad. We don't like this. now there's actually a lot of people going back and saying, oh, those coal power stations, they're independent of Russian supply. That would be quite nice. So short term, maybe not necessarily. But in the medium and longer term, absolutely. However, we're also seeing, since you mentioned hydropower, we're having a very, very dry summer season over here. And hydropower is not looking good because a lot of the reservoirs, a lot of the rivers for hydropower have no water or have very, very low water levels. So hydropower is not at the same level that it used to be in other years. So it's all playing together to create a not very favorable picture of energy supply in Europe.
Dr. Schiffling, like you said, there are so many moving pieces, and maybe the short-term goals and long-term goals have to go separately, not sort of a silver bullet, if you will. So what coordinated measures by the EU do you think then are necessary to lower utility bills and secure the bloc's energy security in the coming winter? Because it's also about not having a freezing winter.
Absolutely. So it is all happening very, very soon. I mean, we're already in the middle of September, so we are expecting quite cold temperatures to come within a couple of weeks. And that is very much threatening now to see it's coming up so soon. And we don't have a magic bullet to just put it all away and find the solution. It will be about demand reduction. So that will play a very important part. But also governments are aiming to help out citizens, but also businesses. A lot of focus has been on household prices. How are people going to pay for their heating, for their lighting in their houses? But focus also needs to be on industry. A lot of small businesses, going back to my bakery example, if you're a small bakery, you just don't have the money for energy bills that are rising 4 times, 5 times as high as they used to be. So countries are now thinking about energy caps. Can we cap the amount that energy providers can charge you? What can be done to limit that cost? Are we having payments to consumers, to organizations, or are we capping how much they can be charged? So trying to help people in that way. Also a lot of targeted help for particularly vulnerable groups. So if you're thinking about pensioners who might be on a lower income, people who have disabilities, who have low income levels, that's really important to try and help those particularly vulnerable people to get through this winter.
And Dr. Schiffling, thank you so much for providing us with the context. In the few months when it gets colder, we hope to connect with you again to see how things are going, if the policies evolve at all from what's been already proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.